How are you, Jenny?
How are you?
I am great. I'm just trying to see us, and
On screen.
there's me Bitmoji. Hello, me Bitmoji.
How's it going?
It's great.
I
How are
miss
you?
your face. It's been so long.
I know, Jenny. I know. I'm seeing my face a lot right now with the hi. I'll just see if we can move that one out of the way.
Oh, that's so funny.
Um, Not sure why that's happening. So hang on just a moment.
That's okay.
Um,
Hello, everyone who's watching us today. It's so nice to see you. We had a break last week and it's been a busy couple of weeks. I do love your flower in your hair, Kylie, as you're doing your final prep.
How's my Bitmoji got its flower in its hair as well as my...
Oh, emoji, I can only see you.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a good sign because all I can see is a giant screen of the Bitmoji.
Oh no, I can see you beautiful in your black dress, which I do love. It's a new one. I haven't seen you in a black dress before.
No, this isn't a new one, but I actually did buy a couple of new dresses while I was away. That was very exciting.
Clothes in New Zealand are fabulous.
Yes. Oh, yay. Okay, now I've got just you and I. So
Okay.
that's awesome. And phew. So, Jenny, I'm loving your jumper. That's a gorgeous color on you. And is it chilly up there?
It is a bit chilly at the moment. It's probably about 15, 16 degrees, but I've been a bit unwell the last couple of weeks, so I'm keeping my chest rugged up and warm to try and get myself past this whatever it is.
Oh, good on you. That's not good, is it? So I've been, as you know, away in New Zealand at my sister's wedding. And I think, well, I'm not sure the percentage, but a very large percentage of people from the wedding are sick with a little tummy bug, including my sister and her husband on their honeymoon. So that's not good, is it?
No, it helps to have a cast iron stomach at a wedding, I think.
Yeah. It was a magical wedding. I haven't been to a wedding in so long. Well, at least 2 years. So it was really, really special. Lots of tears. It's very emotional and gorgeous.
Of course, and so good for you to be able to go and see it with the borders opening up just at the right time for you to go over and be able to spend that special time with your family. It's so
Yeah, it was just magical. And I have to say, we came back and just went, oh, because it was such a whirlwind of like every day of every moment of everything was planned out with things happening. And so then we got back and we're like, right. But I have to
but you came back and went, that's right, I'm seeing Jenny on Friday.
Yay! That's right. And you know what I was just discussing with my family last night is I just feel so incredibly lucky that I love what I do. Because the next morning, boom, I was on Zoom and I was like, hi, Lisa, to my first client. I was like, yay, it's so good. I'm glad I'm not just driving in, traffic for an hour to go and sit in an office, that's grey and, and doesn't suit me. So yeah, I feel super lucky to have this life as well as have had the opportunity to be away. So that was
awesome.
That was super awesome. But Jenny, tell me all about this week. This is a really important week for Australia and particularly important for you, but for all of us. So tell me all about what's happening. We'll tell everybody about what's happening.
I will. And before I start, though, I'm going to start with something that's really important and a very big part of this week is an acknowledgement to country. So I'm a Bundjalung woman. I'm from Northern Rivers. My family grew up. My mum and her father were from Cabbage Island area in Northern Rivers of New South Wales, just around your area too, Kylie. And as a Bundjalung woman, an acknowledgement of country is really an important, or any Indigenous person, it's a really important part of meetings and connection with others. So I'd like to pay my respect to elders past and present and the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today. So I'm in Yagara Turrbal country in Brisbane. You're down on Bundjalung country, Kylie, in my land. And it's about saying welcome, come together, and we want to pay our respects to the fact that this land has been here for so many years and there's been continuous inhabitants for over 60,000 years on this planet, on this space of land that we're on now. And what's amazing about Reconciliation Week And it's a really interesting week for me because it's the one week I feel anybody can ask questions about reconciliation, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. It's that one week that's about education and awareness. It's actually a week for all Australians, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. And what it means, and it's what's really interesting, it's the same date every year. So it's always the 27th of May until the 3rd of June. And there are two very important reasons why that is. So the first one being on the 27th of May in 1967, Australia in the referendum voted 90.77%, so the most successful referendum Australia has ever had, to to enable Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to be recognised as part of the population of Australia. So they were first put into the census after 1967, which is an incredible thing. When we could vote before then, there was lots of other things that we could do. We could fight for our country, but we were not considered part of the population or part of the census. So it's a really important and significant day in Australia's history to actually recognise that the peoples who've been here for 60,000 plus years were actually part of the population in Australia. So that's a really important day to start with. On the 3rd of June, though, is a day that most Australians know, and even many people from overseas know, which is Mabo Day. And Mabo Day is when the High Court ruled that Australia as a continent was not terra nullius, that there were inhabitants here prior to settlement and colonization, and that those inhabitants had a continuing connection to the country and the land. And that triggered a lot of things like native title and traditional ownership, and actually started to recognize Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as owners and the original custodians of the land that we all walk on, play on, live on, and get to dream on. So it's a really important week. And I think it ties in, and we were talking about this earlier this week about how this ties in with the conversation around business models and frameworks to help share your voice. And Reconciliation Australia, who has a framework for reconciliation for organisations, has done that really beautifully. They've created a very simple model and framework that allows anybody, non-Indigenous and otherwise, to actually see what reconciliation means. And it's based around pillars of respect, governance, employment, opportunities, and education. And what that does is it gives a language and a voice to each of those areas and how we can actually create connection and engagement. So for those who don't know about Reconciliation Week, please go to Reconciliation Australia. There's a number of other websites. AATSIS is a really great website, which we'll put in the link, that has some incredible history of Australia, pre-colonisation and post, and some beautiful ways to connect with, I guess, our nation as a whole.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jenni. Honestly, it's so incredibly important. And actually, I did not know that was only in the 60s. Yeah. That just blows my mind. That completely blows my mind. And it's
from you coming with Waitangi Day in New Zealand, which is such an important day of the signing of the treaty in early 1800s. And that treaty has been in place for so many years. And there's lots of conversations in Australia about treaties and things. And we're not going to get into that political discussion today. But it is a recognition and such an important part of our history.
Yeah, isn't it just? And just to tell you a little bit about my trip, is that my brother and my nieces also came with us. So Clover and I arrived a couple of days in New Zealand beforehand, and so did our little Auckland catch up, which is where we're from. But for my nieces, it was their first trip to New Zealand. And so what we did was we picked them up from the airport. My mum came too, and we headed straight down south. So we went to Rotorua, which is an amazing, amazing place to visit, has a lot of cultural significance. And we went to the Whakarewarewa, which is the only last living Māori village there. We had a beautiful guide that took us through, learned so much about the history. It was, I've been there many, many times, but to do that with the girls was just magical. And then we went to Waitomo Caves. We had another Māori guide there take us through. And then at one point she said, we got down into the cathedral under the ground where all the glowworms are and things. Oh, wow. And she said, who would like to sing? Oh, and the other thing, because of COVID, we were the only ones on each of our tours, which was just incredible. Not great for them, but super great for us. But while we were down inside the caves in this amazing cathedral, she said, who would like to sing? Because you won't have heard anything like your voice when you actually sing in here. And none of us were putting our hand up at all. But then my brother said to her, what about if you were to sing? And so she sang one of our traditional songs, Po Karakariana, and it was just the most, I cried and cried. It was the most,
when you're talking about
it was the most moving moment, I think, of my life. Every one of us standing there was crying. And it was just so incredibly stunning. So I feel like I've been able to give my family a good shot and a good dose of some of their heritage, which has been incredible. So coming back, and then with the messages that you and I have exchanged, and I was like, right, we've just got to get into a bit more of understanding about what goes here. So I'd like to put forward a little challenge to everybody this week, and that's to go and find the Adam Gould movie. I'm pretty sure you can find it on Netflix, but my family, we went and watched it all together at the cinema. I think it was last year or maybe the year before when it first came out, and it was so moving and so powerful, and it really gave me so much more of an understanding that I just didn't have at all. So I'd like to put that one out there as a challenge, and there might be a different film that you could suggest of to give people a bit more of an understanding.
Lots. I have images. I'm terrible with the names of movies, but I have lots of incredible images. A really beautiful book, though, if you don't want to watch a movie, is Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe. Beautiful book that has, and he is an incredible writer. So looking at his work, which sort of describes and shares a lot of the culture and history. But to be honest, I think what I would love is for people to go and explore the land and the country that they're on now. What is the heritage and the history of the country that you're on now, and why is it significant? And in particular, things like AACTA, so it's the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples actually provides a full history, and they're actually the holder of all the history of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So they have very rare books and very rare articles and papers that you can read, and they have a beautiful website that you can engage in to see what Aboriginal culture actually is, because there's so many definitions of what that looks like and so many different ways that can be represented. When you look at something like that, which is walking into essentially our version of the Heritage Museum in the US, what's it called, the Natural History Museum, we have that online. They've captured that beautifully online, so you can actually explore and look at little videos from all across Australia on that website. So it's a beautiful place to
Beautiful, thank you. So when I first moved to Australia 26 years ago, I think 27 years ago maybe, I could not understand why there was no language in the schools. So in New Zealand, we grew up having to learn the Māori language in primary school. Then as part of my communications degree, we had to do a year of Māori language and Māori cultural studies and everything, particularly so that we could just pronounce the place names and understand all of the things, so that at least we're doing it correctly and respectfully and all of that. So I couldn't understand what was going on here. Where's all the language in primary schools? And then a dear friend of mine said, well, how would you do that? Because every area has a different language. So that was my first starting to understand, whoa, it's a completely different world than the one that I've come from, a very different way of doing it. So I love that you've put that challenge out there to us all to go and study about the country that we're on and find out more about that. So thanks for that.
There was over 176, depending on how you look at it, depends on which history book you're looking through. But Australia was not a single nation. Australia was actually made up of over 200 plus nations of individual Aboriginal and then in the Torres Strait groups. And so having all those individual groups, it's like having, the suburb that I'm living in and the suburb next to me were two completely different nations from a land perspective. And that's how they managed resources. That's how they worked and engaged together. That's how they managed to survive, because it wasn't about one people's going from east to west. It was actually about using the resources in the space around you. And I think that's what's really fabulous around when we start to deep dive and look at the map of Australia and see what the pre-colonized map of Australia looked like. It's completely different. And look, change happens, and we can have a whole conversation of the negative and the positives associated with colonization. And there's it is what it is though right now. And I really want to, as an Indigenous person, as an Indigenous business owner, want to make sure that we start to look at how do we actually start to move forward and draw on that history and actually use that to fuel an incredible future, because we've been here for 60,000 plus years. Let's continue that culture for another, or that connection for another 60,000 years. There's nothing stopping us doing that. And so drawing on that knowledge gives us that power to do that.
I love that you say the power to do that. And that's another thing that came up for me back at home is that there's, they're calling it the resurgence. So it's about embracing the culture and you know, particularly bringing more of the language into everyday use. Yeah. A couple of my cousins have been to Māori University and done their whole degrees in the Māori language, etc. But what I noticed, there's a whole lot more of going on, so the facial tribal tattoos, because of course many years ago you couldn't be in the police force, you couldn't be in the ambulance or any of those things with any kind of facial tattoos. So now I don't even know what other reasons that people have for doing it, other than it's now accepted, it's encouraged, it's all that kind of stuff from my observations anyway, which was really, really beautiful to see. Now my nieces, whose mother is Australian, so and as I said, they hadn't been back to New Zealand, they just kept going, wow. So a lot of the time it's the women that have this part here, but the men would have the full facial, and it's just so beautifully done, beautiful works of art. And they were just so intrigued because they're used to seeing, you know, here in Australia particularly, it's quite trendy, there'd be some skulls on your neck, or you know, some all kinds of whatever. It could be a frangipani flower, who knows, whatever it is that means something to you. But seeing these tribal tattoos is a completely different look, and incredibly special. So I'm excited that you know, that we're all getting to learn a bit more and understand the importance of understanding what's happened in the past, but what we can do in the future.
And this is the week to do it, because this is actually about all of Australia. It's not just about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It's about how we as a nation now can work together to actually create change and rebuild a beautiful community. There's a number of communities that don't have the same opportunity, and this week is really about recognizing how we as a whole nation can start to identify and understand the challenges that sit across our nation, and how and the part we play in actually rebuilding that as a whole. So it is a really great week. So thank you for letting me know.
Thank you, Jenni. And so I think it's a great opportunity that I can ask you this question then, which will help a lot of the people listening, is what's an appropriate way that we can talk about it when we're wanting to do social posts and acknowledge and all that kind of thing that's culturally sensitive? And because I think a lot of people might be similar to me, where we don't post because we don't want to do it in the wrong way. And I'll give you an example of with all that stuff that went on last year that was just horrific about Black Lives Matter and what was, you know, started in America. And then we thought it was great to get on that bandwagon and show our support. And then there was all this negativity around it saying, but if you don't employ someone that's Indigenous, if you don't this, if you don't this, if you don't this, then you have no right to say hashtag Black Lives Matter. And so then it put us back in a little box of don't put it out there, because you know, you can get vilified for even just trying to show some kind of support. So it was really tricky. So what is the best way that you could share with us how we could share? Like, is it that we could do our research on what country we're on and share the knowledge we have about that? Or do we feel awkward for getting it wrong, for example?
So the first thing I would say is do an acknowledgement. The very first thing, and that's actually one of the key movement this week that Reconciliation Australia is encouraging everyone to be part of. And if you go to Reconciliation Australia's Facebook page, they have a challenge at the moment of inviting everybody to do an acknowledgement of country. So that's simply a post and there's lots of frameworks and examples that you can get off Reconciliation Australia's website, or if you just use the hashtag NRW 2021, you'll actually see lots of examples. And it's just individual or people's, and I've got one on my page that basically just says, I would like this week to acknowledge the country that we're on, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Simply that statement, and mean it. And maybe describe what it means to you for reconciliation. So I think part of the conversation of this particular week and having that is about saying, look, you know what, I'm behind the 8 ball if you feel that you are, and I'm trying to actually understand, and I want to start with a simple acknowledgement to recognize that the country that I'm living on and working on and playing on has had a continuing connection to a whole peoples that I now am aware of, if you didn't know before. And so for many people, they're even saying, finding out where they were born. So what country they were on when they were born and where they currently work. So how you go about that and the depth you want to take that is entirely up to you. But you can simply start by saying, we acknowledge the country that we're meeting on today. that in itself is an acknowledgement and recognition that you of your learnings to start with, and then you can simply ask questions. I think people are often scared too, and in the same way that we would ask questions of somebody who might come to us and you're like, oh, I'm not really sure, I want to ask a question. Just be honest, be respectful about how you engage, and that's really what it's about. It's and I guess I have a differing opinion about the vilification that happened last year and the Black Lives Matters. If you want to show your support for a movement, show your support for a movement, but just be honest and open about why you're doing it. Not because it's about trying to get likes and greater engagement on social media. Do it because it's important to you. So while we're inviting everyone to do this today, I don't want you to do it if it's not authentic to you. And I mean that truthfully. There's no judgment in that. It's just don't do it if it's not authentic to you. If you're interested and engaged and want to learn, go learn. But also don't then judge others for a differing opinion around that. And I think that's really important. It's the reconciliation as a word. If you look at the definition of reconciliation, it's about bringing peoples together. It's about recognizing the strengths of both sides and moving forward from that reconciliation. And so it's not about saying we're better or we're worse, we're wrong, we're right. It's simply saying this is it, this is what is, and let's find a way to come together and move forward. So my advice is start with acknowledgement, find out the country you're on, or go read a book. Go and read a book from one of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander amazing novelists that are around, and researchers and historians, and start listening and engaging with that work. And then if you want to post, actually watch it and then make a post about it and what it meant to you. So
that's a wonderful idea. That's a wonderful idea. Thank you, Jenni. And perhaps you and I both, in the caption of this post, can put in maybe some suggestions for some podcasts to listen to, some books to read, some films to watch that you might want to recommend, and to help people, because I think there's a lot of people like me that would love to know more, just not really sure where to start.
Yeah.
So.
And I know, and it's funny, I know when we were talking about this, the reconciliation week came into Mabo, we were talking about this week being about business models and frameworks. It was funny when I wanted to talk about this, and we may have to talk about it next week because I know we've been talking a while about this, is that it's about providing a language that people understand. And so for us as business owners, we've created, frameworks that we can share our knowledge with, that we can share our information with, so people feel comfortable and safe about the discussion. And so that's what it's about, is find a framework, find a language that you're comfortable in, that you're able to share where you are now and where you want to be, and learn how to bridge that gap. So that's really what we're talking about here with your education, is saying, this is my starting point. Be okay to say, I know nothing. Because, but having said that, there is so much opportunity to learn. But we just want to say, well, where are you now? And what is the framework and the language that you want to use in order to share your position, how you feel about it, and what that means to you? And that's the same in whether it's business or life, that framework follows us everywhere.
I love that. And I'd love to ask you a question. And yes, I agree. We'll do our other topic next week. But I think this has been so important because, I'm certainly learning a lot just right now. But Jenni, my question to you is it appropriate for anyone, if it feels right for them, to do a welcome to country? And if so, when do you do it?
Really great question. So there's a big difference between a welcome to country and acknowledgement of country. And I'm going to use a very simple example that's not related to Indigenous peoples, but then I'll bring it back. So a welcome to country is what you do when you're in your own home. So you open the front door of your house and you say, welcome to my home. Come in, what's mine is yours. So you're welcoming them into your space. An acknowledgement of country is something that I would do if I opened your front door and welcomed your guests in and said, hey, this is Kylie's space. So one is about ownership, one is about the traditional custodians. So the only people who can do a welcome to country is someone from that country on their own land. So in most cases, it's done by a traditional owner. But even if you're not a traditional owner, which is a recognition under the Native Title Act, as opposed to all Indigenous people, because not all Indigenous people are traditional owners. So as a traditional owner or an Aboriginal person from that particular country. So when I'm down on Bundjalung land, if I'm doing a workshop in Ballina, then I can do a welcome to country as being from that land. But if I'm up here in Brisbane, I do an acknowledgement to country. So I'm acknowledging the Turrbal and Yugara people as the traditional owners of the land here in Brisbane. So a welcome to country is done by the owners, and the acknowledgement to country is done by those who are visiting the land and saying that they're acknowledging that they're visiting somewhere else and they'd actually like safe passage and like to and acknowledge that they're going to leave the place that they found, leave it as they found it or better.
Brilliant. Thank you. Totally makes sense. So if you were not an Indigenous person and you were standing up and about to present, you know, at a conference or something, what would the appropriate thing? Acknowledgement of country then. So it doesn't matter that they're not at all, they're just acknowledging being on that country.
Yeah, you're acknowledging the fact that you're in essentially you are, and as the words say, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land or the custodians of the land and pay my respect to the elders past and present. So Maureen's listed. Maureen Shelley acknowledges the elders of the Bundjalung people and the elders of the Bundjalung peoples, past and present. Yes, that's a beautiful way of doing it. So lots of different ways to do it. There's some great resources. You can literally Google acknowledgement to country and you'll get so many examples and different examples of them. There can be a simple one. There can be a detailed one. When I'm doing mine, I talk about it, what it means to me. So for me, an acknowledgement of country is welcoming. It's about bringing people together. It's acknowledging the past. But I like to take the time when I do an acknowledgement to also say, why are we here? So I set the intention of the meeting of drawing on that knowledge and that history and saying, so we have an incredibly rich past, but in this room and wherever we're working, there's some incredible knowledge and experience here. And so through the acknowledgement, I acknowledge the elders past and present and the Indigenous people that are present as well. But I also want to pay respect to the incredible knowledge in the room and that we're all going to actually draw on that to move forward. So that's how I like to do my acknowledgement. And they can be personal. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter. And, you know, neither of us really like cookie cutter. So feel comfortable doing it. But as I said, take baby steps. If this is very new to you, just start with a very simple one-line acknowledgement. That's all it means, but say it from the heart. And then as you get more comfortable, you can actually then share a story or share the intention as you become more comfortable with that.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Jenni. That has been just fantastic today. And just to wrap it up, I'd love to find out or just share with us about your retreat that you've just run over the weekend, because I had so much FOMO when I looked at your pickies.
Well, you'll be at the next one in September, I'm sure. It was amazing. We had our third retreat and it was phenomenal. We actually, and one of the biggest breakthroughs for me was one of our beautiful healers who are at our workshop, Nicolette, who we've been having these conversations about how you bridge that gap. And this is this framework piece of language. And she has developed the most beautiful model and framework around what she does so that she can translate that and share that with people who aren't in the healing space, but have a really clear transition of message to her. So that was one of the biggest wins out of the weekend. We do business models, we do pricing. You know, I love conversations about pricing, structure, resources, program design, your messages and your language, all of that stuff over the 3 days. And it was amazing. Lots of champagne, lots of amazing food made by Andy and Bren, and just really great conversation and collaboration, which it's the heart and soul of all our programs. So it was definitely lots of fun. And the next one's in September.
Awesome. So how do people get in touch with you, Jenni?
If you can come into it, so blah, 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 blah. At a moment, right? Elephant in the Room AU on Facebook and Instagram are the easiest ways to find me. So it's at Elephant in the Room AU on Instagram and Facebook. You can get to my website from there. That's where I tend to hang out. Send me a message if you want to learn more about our programs. But Kylie, how do we find you?
The Hello Media Facebook groups where I spend most of my time hanging out, which is just facebook.com/groups/Hello Media. And of course, there's hellomedia.team on Instagram and on Facebook, and the website hellomedia.team. So yeah, really looking forward to another big financial year coming up. We've got just
so excited. 1 month
left to wrap up 2020 and 2021, which is exciting. So yeah, next week we'll be talking about our business models piece.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this. It means a lot. I mean, I know this wasn't the intended topic of today, so I do hope people have found value in it. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to chat to you today about it, Kylie.
I'm so grateful for your sharing. So thank you, Jenni, and I hope that it has helped some others. And as I said, we'll put into the captions of both of our posts some resources that people can go to, websites and podcasts and all sorts of things to help you on your journey to more understanding of what we need to know more about. So
thank you so much. Have an amazing day. It's so good to have you back in Australia.
So good to be back and so good to see you again. Thanks, Jenny. And see you next Friday and see everyone else next Friday. All right. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.